Chapter 121. Alden Thorin had learned a valuable life lesson tonight. A single moment of honesty could transform a manageable party into a gauntlet of social suffering. And that social suffering was exponentially worse when it involved Vulras. I've always said, that girl is going to snap and kill someone one day, a lady who Alden thought was Roman's mother told him, leaning so close that the edge of her stole trailed through the limed ginger ale he was carrying. You were lucky it was only a mental assault and not the end of your life. Death was watching you. Mark my words. Yikes, thought Alden. Almost as soon as he escaped from that woman, he ran into a boy a couple of years younger than him who talked like he possessed superhuman lung capacity even though he wasn't avowed yet. I used to think Hazel was nice, but she is not really nice because one time I told her about my hamster, and she asked why I thought she would care, and when Tara got sick and they didn't give her Chainer, Hazel said, "Well, what do you expect?" And I said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "Tara pronounces words like her tongue is made of cement," and I said, "Who's Tara?" Alden asked solely to stem the river of noise. "My second oldest sister." And I said, "What do you mean her tongue is made of cement?" And Hazel said, "Don't you ever shut up?" How could she say that to someone whose sister just became a C rank? It was so mean. So I said, "Save me," thought Alden. But couldn't you really get a proper education without private tutors? Another boy asked. I don't know. I feel like you should be more worried than most people. Dare I ask why? A young man in your position has to be careful about presentation, one of Luke's aunts told him. Let me put you in touch with my publicist. Now if Aliyah asks to speak to you alone. The speaker was someone who was the stepfather of someone else who was the cousin of. Alden didn't even want to remember it. You call me. Tell me everything she says, and I'll give you advice. It was just peace of mind, son. A man who definitely didn't look old enough to be calling strange teenagers son said in an exasperated voice. You've got to think these things through. Any Vulra is a good catch for a B rank. So even if they're a little cracked around the edges you can't waste an opportunity. Alden, where the hell are you three? Somebody get me away from this. Alden, there you are. Called the voice of his savior. Hoyu bounced up, jingling with costume jewelry. You're needed. Over here with me. For party reasons. You left me alone for so long, Alden complained once they'd escaped. It was just 5 minutes. I thought I spotted the prize bubble with the watch in it. Alden, that can't be true. I talked to 100 Vulras. There aren't even 100 Vulras here, Hoyu said. Alden, that dude over there thinks I need special tutors because I came from America. Can't we leave yet? Hoyu, sure. But you were the one who thought you should stay. Alden sighed. After Hazel had exploded and fled from the party, his roommates had suggested an exit. But Lute was staying, and Alden didn't want to look like he was running away after dropping the pebble that caused an avalanche. Besides, the plan to back up Lute and facilitate his return to the Vulra fold wasn't actually shot. If anything, it seemed like it was going better than anticipated. Aliyah was still acting like she was delighted to have them all here anyway. I think me singling out Hazel as a problem and implying her presence was my only issue with the Vulras might have made it seem like I really was grateful and willing to get to know the rest of them. A grateful, willing person wouldn't try to escape when Aliyah had so openly sided with him over her own granddaughter. She's even scarier than I thought. She was so. Maybe the word for it was unflappable? Alden didn't know what had gone through her head in that moment when she'd analyzed his accusation against Hazel. But he knew she'd had a thought and then acted on it immediately with the expectation that every member of her family would fall in line. She outed Hazel's skill. They all seemed to believe that was something really extreme, and it was definitely irrevocable. And she made a decision to do it in about half a minute. Alden looked over to her. The Vulra matriarch was holding someone's baby while she talked to her son, Benjamin. Today was his 70th birthday, and this party was for him. But he was just about the quietest person here. Benjamin was an A rank who appeared to be in his mid-30s. He was an average-looking guy by avowed standards, and he had a ton of kids with a carry, the second oldest S-rank chainer in the world. Aunt Connie would love to hear all about this. Alden had been so busy since starting school that they'd only had a couple of short chats. But the Villas were basically one of those reality television shows she liked, dialed up to 1,000 and infused with magic. Hugh is still shooting nasty looks at us. Lexi, what do you expect? Alden accused his daughter of power abuse in front of everyone here. That scene has probably already been uploaded to the web. Alden's legs stopped carrying him forward. The sounds of the party faded. Oh fuck. Hugh glanced at him and then did a double take when he caught sight of what Alden was sure was a nauseous expression on his face. It's nothing to worry about, he said quickly. You didn't sound unreasonable. What if it really is on the internet, though? The corners of Hugh's lips tipped up in a polite smile, and he blinked at Alden. That's the expression you'd give a kid who just told you they had some suspicions about Santa Claus. Hugh? It's fine. It was edited before it went up. Someone already posted it. You've watched it? Hugh started air typing as fast as he could. Hugh, you giving her the class wasn't mentioned. It's obvious some of what she shouted at you and some of what you said was clipped, so people will make up all kinds of things. But it doesn't make you look bad. Loot, no to offend the witch. Everyone knows. Normal business. Hugh, he's trying to say that it's natural for the video to be edited. Nobody here wants to offend his grandmother. Alden, then why would they put it online at all? Don't worry, said Hugh. Alaya herself backed you up. You look good. It's fine, Alden told himself. He had meant nearly every word he'd said. It was just. Alden, I hate being the center of public commentary. I knew the drones were there, but they're everywhere all the time. I was getting too used to them. Do you want me to call Molly? Hugh asked. Your mom's assistant? She handles stuff like this. She'll tell you it's all right. No. It's okay. I just didn't think it through. Hugh shrugged. We can't overthink every little thing. Last year, a member of my parents' hero group wore a hat that resembled a hat that some member of Superhumans at large was wearing when she was caught, and there are still people who refuse to believe it was a coincidence instead of a political statement. And? You do not look like this story is making you feel better, so. Have some ginger ale. Alden looked down at his cup. One of Luke's relatives dipped her scarf in it. That is tragic. Let's get you another one. Line of asterisks. Alden mingled for as long as he could endure it, and then he went to hide in a dumpster. It was a very nice dumpster that had clearly never seen any garbage. He had cushions to sit on and big fake gemstones that were really battery-powered lamps to enjoy. The dumpsters are for children, a little girl informed him. She was standing on the convenient stepladder that you could use to climb inside, looking down at him. There's no sign that says that. There were a lot of bouncy balls and a large set of magnetic blocks in here, but those could have been toys for all ages. No reason for adults not to enjoy building a good magnet castle every now and then. Everyone knows it, the girl said. I'm a child. She squinted at him. Are you an avowed yet? You can't hold it against me. Hey, said a familiar voice. Loot hopped up and landed in a crouch on the lip of the metallican with unnatural grace. You're in the kid's trash can? See. I told you it wasn't for you. The girl announced. Sweet, said Loot. He let himself topple forward and sprawl on his back on the cushions beside Alden. You're amazing. I need to go to Chicago. You and Angela Aubergine both came from there. There must be something in the water. Yes. Proper fluoridation in my youth has led to this moment. Alden swallowed as he stared at the web page he pulled up on his interface. 60,000 views and rising. Don't read the comments. I know. Then why are you doing it? You don't know that I am. Of course you are. Everyone reads the comments. Luke crossed his arms behind his head. A piece of confetti fluttered down into the dumpster and landed on his t-shirt. The girl had disappeared from the stepladder. Sorry, man. I should have mentioned that a get-together like this, with non-relatives in attendance, is pretty much always fair game for posting and gossiping about. I knew. I saw the drones. I just didn't think of myself as being that interesting. In all fairness, I doubt you'd be that fascinating on your own. I'm sure it's my grandmother's apology and Hazel's unhinged rant that are getting 1,000 views a minute. Or maybe it's me choking to death on chips in the background. I've got major stage presence. He grabbed a bouncy ball and tossed it at the wall of the dumpster. It'll go through the door like wildfire, but if it makes you feel better, bullet drama tends not to spread quite as widely as something like superhero news in the rest of the world. Alden sighed and swiped the video away. Thanks. Luke sent the text privately instead of through their group chat. I'm sorry my family made a mess. It's what they do. Thanks for coming. Having you guys here was great. And as far as I'm concerned, he said out loud, telling the entire island that my cousin doesn't have the decency to keep her skill away from unwilling people was a community service. Her father isn't taking this well, Alden texted. I'm in this dumpster partially because he looks like he wants to do me in. Hugh? Luke scoffed. His fingers started flickering through the air. Listen, let me tell you something about Hugh. He's a loser. He divorced the sexy S-rank right after having a kid with her because she was cooler than him and people kept pointing it out. So then he married a C-rank that looks suspiciously similar to his first wife, but with a way weaker personality. He's scared of his own mother, his father, his ex, his son, and obviously Aliyah. He's been trying to ride Hazel's coattails toward glory since she was born, and Aliyah just yanked off Hazel's coat and threw it in a shredder. Alden tried to input all of that. I'm saying he doesn't have the courage or the energy to doing, Luke said. And if he did try something, we could beat him. Alden snorted. You think? I'm positive. Luke glanced over. You want me to give you a free peace of mind? What? No. Come on. I'm not that upset. Decompressing in luxury garbage cans is part of my process. Every party needs a few of these things. He banged on the metal wall behind his head for emphasis. Okay. But it's really no big deal. So if you change your mind. I'm good, Alden insisted. Then let's get out of here and go back to sanity. I've got what we came here for. Alden stared at him. Already? The Libra invitation? I mean this, said Luke, pulling a large tin of caviar out from under his shirt. We shall eat like kings. The rest of us will anyway. I would have stolen something for you, too, but there were no expensive fruits and vegetables lying around in plain sight. I wouldn't worry about the Libra invite, he added. I don't know what Aliyah's twisted mind thinks about me right now, but she's obviously pro-you. So I bet it'll happen. They climbed out of the dumpster and met up with Hoyu and Lexi nearby. The two of them weren't alone. I could walk with you guys to the train, Roman said, dropping faux pearls and dazzling bangle bracelets into one of the plastic shopping bags Lexi was filling. If you needed some company. There are 4 of us, Luke pointed out. We kind of make our own company. He can come. Lexi's tone was that of a man who had just agreed to have his molars removed by someone wielding pliers. Politely escaping from the party took 20 minutes. People kept stopping them to offer commentary, and there was at least one conspicuous drone pointed at Alden like he was about to do a trick. And then, right before they reached the street, they were stopped by the absolute last person they wanted to have an encounter with. Luke, said Jessica Valra, I'm so glad you decided to come. How have you, guys? This is Aliyah's daughter Jessica, Luke said in a dead voice, staring straight over her shoulder. Jessica, these are my roommates. We're kind of in a hurry. Alden's concerns about being filmed were completely forgotten for a moment. He almost wished Luke's mother would recognize him from their brief encounter the other night in the hall of Laura's apartment building. It might be easier if she caused a scene of some kind with him, instead of staring at Luke like she was about to cry. Even Hoyu didn't seem to have a way to combat this level of tension. His smile was forced. Roman let out a gasp. Good, thought Alden. He knows them both. Maybe he'll say something helpful. A finger tapped him on his shoulder, and when he looked toward Roman, the other boy shoved a half-finished iced coffee into his hand. What? Does my hair look okay? Roman demanded. It's got some confetti in it. Why? Roman flipped his head upside down and shook out his hair. A second after he righted himself, he disappeared into thin air. By the time Alden got over his surprise, Lute had taken the opportunity afforded by the distraction to leave. Lexi and Hoyu were following him. Nodding at Jessica awkwardly, Alden took off after them. "All right," Hoyu said a couple of minutes later as they walked past a club that was advertising a comedy night. "That was definitely more interesting than Constantine's party. I always hoped high school would be exciting, but it's exceeding my expectations on that front already. I declare our first operation a success," Lute said in a tone so blithe Alden would never have guessed he'd just had what must have been an emotional encounter. "We survived my family. Lexi didn't find the diamonds, but he claimed like 80% of the party favors anyway, and he will never run out of jewelry again. They are Christmas presents for my little sister." And Alden revealed his true nature to us and everyone else, Lute continued. Alden groaned. "Righteous, politely devastating," Lute said. "He was polite," Hoyu agreed. "It made his attack so much more effective." Lute hopped over a grate in the sidewalk. Alden was glad they approved. "And at least I know for sure now where Hazel and I stand." He thought it would be less stressful in the long run to have it all out in the open. Now he wouldn't have to wonder why she had done it and what it meant and if he was crazy for being upset about it. "There are some real idiots in the comments on the video," said Lexi. "You definitely shouldn't read them." "You're reading them?" Lexi shrugged. "Most people are cheering you on," said Hoyu. "I don't want to be cheered on. I want to be ignored." "Someone's connected you to the Gokurech songs video Finley posted yesterday," Hoyu said. "It's starting to get a lot of hits, too." Alden considered it. "That's not enough of a comfort. But I'll take it." "Are you really going to send that thing to your foreign friend?" Lexi asked. "Yes," said Alden. "My foreign friend needs to know how much we're all enjoying his contributions." "Can't we discuss anything other than the Hazel incident?" There was just a second of silence, then Lexi said, "Lute, your cousin Roman needs a pet or something. One that doesn't mind him talking to it for hours." Mention of Roman made Alden look down at the coffee he was still carrying. "I can throw this away, right? He's not going to reappear and want it?" "His summonses usually last around 30 minutes, Lexi reported. "We'll be back at the apartment." "I say trash it. You guys talked about his summonses?" Hoyu asked. "He talked," Lexi said in a sullen voice. "He mistook my silence for me being a good listener." "If you remembered everything he said, doesn't that make you a good listener?" Manon Bar had barely gotten any sleep since she had made it back to Earth. "Astounding how much can fall apart when I'm only gone for a few hours." Now she was on the 3rd floor of a building, sitting in a folding chair and watching the people in the alley below her through a window. It had been all too easy to get in. She'd simply told the owner she was considering renting this empty space at a later date, and the access code had been granted. She had an excellent reputation in the event industry. There was no reason to say no to her even if a party for a certain noteworthy family was taking place this evening. Manon's inbox was full of angry, confused messages from the boater, and there was an obnoxious amount of respectful advice on the pursuit of our shared interests from Alia's daughter-turned-personal assistant. The first issue was being addressed one boater member at a time. 3 of them were already pacified, and the others would be, as soon as she could manage it. All the busybodying from Alia's little helper was unnecessary. Manon had carved the grooves that her people's lives fit into. They were mostly content, and they would refocus themselves on the things that really mattered after she had devoted enough time to tucking troublesome ideas into the recesses of their minds again. Alia only makes my job more difficult by butting in. Now that some of them had discovered a representative would come running at their call, they were getting an overinflated sense of their own importance. That would have to be handled, too. Manon wasn't sure the extra work the Vlras had made for her was unintentional. It would be nice for Alia if I was too busy tending to their petty upsets to ask her inconvenient questions about our agreement. And there was a lot of upset right now. Manon had never suspected that such a brief absence could lead to so much mayhem, Not after all these years. The little shit thought it out. I'll give him that. The members' faith in their leader, their gratitude toward her, and their affection for her would have been strong enough to withstand a simple word of warning. But a multiple essay of warning being delivered to each of them, in duplicate no less, was something else. A spoken word could be pushed out of the mind so quickly. Having so many words that so thoroughly speculated on a portion of their lives shoved in front of their eyes once and then again shortly afterward in hard copy. This was supposed to be the age of text messages and short attention spans. What was a teenager doing outputting research papers on Manon's activities in his free time? Did he not have anything better to do? You'd think someone who just came out of some kind of disaster would have other things to worry about. And why on earth was he standing below her right now, popping confetti balloons at a birthday party? Manon couldn't figure it out. Had Alaya realized the boy was aware of her involvement with the boater? Had she invited Alden Thorne here as some kind of a bribe? Was he here on his own because he'd gotten wind of Alaya backing Manon and he fancied himself a sleuth? He'd arrived with the one-eyed short boy, Jessica's S-rank. Maybe they were acquainted, and it was just a coincidence? It doesn't matter. I'll deal with him when the boater is finally settled again. One chore at a time, and this evening's had already been decided upon. Alaya and her assistant clearly didn't have enough to do lately if they could engage in thinly veiled negotiations with some of Manon's people. She needed them out of the way so that she could re-establish control. An attempt to do the Leaf Song job without her would be doomed. It was obvious to her, but maybe it wasn't so obvious to an out-of-touch S-rank. So tonight we find something to distract her from meddling in my end of the business. If I keep her busy for a while, and I re-establish control fully, she'll leave it alone for now. And finding a way to make sure Alaya honored their bargain could wait just a little longer. That was going to take some more planning. Manon watched. She waited. This party was not hers. The people attending it were not hers. But a rabbit with tailor environment was more used to working on the possessions of others anyway. And Manon's skill had topped out some time ago, the last lovely features settling into her mind and making her one of the very best at figuring out exactly what changes she could make to suit the owner of a space, event, or thought. As a consequence of that, she could also tell what arrangements were less suitable. This party had a few different people who could be considered owners with varying needs and degrees of connection to the space. Manon targeted Benjamin Valra first, since it was the man's birthday. Good Lord, she thought. Did they even ask him if he wanted a party at all? Almost everything in the alley was less than ideal for him. If she had really been rearranging and positioning things to suit him, instead of just taking a peek, she would have ordered a getaway vehicle for the man and told him to go someplace quiet. The only things in this environment that fit him were the cake, the trash bins the children were playing in, and the wrapped gift his eldest daughter was presenting him with. Manon frowned down at Amy, then moved on. She targeted Benjamin's wife next. Hikari Valra. And she suddenly saw a dozen new possible arrangements for tables and chairs. She cares about where people are sitting. It was possible to learn a lot from tailoring an environment. Not really surprising that another S-rank who's been by Alaya's side for so long would be interested in manipulating the various family relationships. Before Manon could move on to a new target, the queen herself arrived. Ah, there you are, Alaya. Let's see what suits you right now. Let's see if a lowly C-rank can make sure it stays out of your grasp. Line of asterisks. An interesting thing about tailor environment that most non-users didn't understand, the owner's wants and needs both mattered when it came to arranging a perfect space. The skill balanced those things, but it didn't tell Manon how it was balancing them or what the client's actual thoughts were. She didn't need to know to do her job, so she didn't. But she could often guess anyway. For example, if the magic indicated that a family heirloom should be placed in a highly visible but otherwise awkward location, that probably meant that the owner was so fond of it their desire for its presence outweighed practicality. Is this something Alaya wants? Or something she needs? Manon wondered, Watching the woman make her way through the crowd with that way she had about her that most older Anisidorans would probably recognize even if she were to suddenly inhabit another body. The woman's ownership of this party was so strong from the moment she appeared that Manon could see the whole puzzle, and what suited Alia most right now wasn't her own comfort, but Alden Thorne's. It wasn't the easiest thing to pick up on, but it was there to an experienced eye. For this space to suit Alia as well as it could in this moment, a particularly nice decoration should be moved into Alden's line of sight. One of the confetti bubbles, no doubt containing a party favor he would like, ought to be shoved in front of him. What's this about? Alia moved through the crowd so swiftly that Manon barely had time to understand what her skill was telling her. Figuring out why it was telling her such a thing would no doubt take hours. She had to move now. It suited Alia for the boy to be comfortable. It suited Manon for Alia to have some trouble. And Alden deserves to be miserable, thought Manon. Sometimes the universe gives us such unexpected opportunities. As Alia engaged him in conversation, Manon looked for an opening. She couldn't exactly toss a chair out of the window and smash the boy over the head, though that would no doubt get the job done. It would have to be handled the subtle way. Which wasn't simple. These weren't her people. On-the-spot thought rearrangement without something that resembled acquiescence from the owner of the thoughts wasn't really what the skill did, but there was a way if she found exactly the right type of person with the right mental state. She tried Jessica first because weak people were usually easier. Then Kate Evilra. Without much hope, she tried Alden himself and found he wouldn't work either. Even at Leaf Song, she had barely managed to push a couple of his thoughts to the back of his mind, suspicions toward her, she was now sure. And that had probably only been possible because a boy on his first assignment was so tense in so many ways that having the tension reduced suited him. Next, she targeted Hazel Vilra, Alia's daughter, though everyone seemed on board with politely pretending she was a great-granddaughter. There. A piece I can move. Manon couldn't read the thought. To her, it was just a shape she was allowed to access and fit into a new slot. To guess at what it was, she would have to know Hazel well or be down there reading the girl's expressions and listening carefully to what she said. And that wasn't possible. But with all involved parties targeted and her skill working at its absolute maximum, Manon could tell that nudging this thought forward in the girl's mind would somehow make the environment less pleasant for Alden and less ideal for Alia. Sloppy. But it will have to do. She focused her full attention on Hazel Vilra. You've got something inside of you that's bothering you, don't you? Something you need and want to let out so badly that you're about to burst with it. There's a part of your mental environment that it would feel so good to let out, but some other pesky concerns are holding you back. For this to be doable on the fly, when Manon had never even spoken to the girl, it must have been like that. Let me help you, Hazel. You'll feel more at home with yourself if you go ahead and say what's on your mind. She lifted the shape of the thought toward the light. Then, she waited. Body language over the past few seconds indicated that Alia was doing a fair job on her own of making Alden Thorne uncomfortable. While Manon was identifying Hazel's usefulness, he'd been shooting a panicky look at the boy with the eye patch. Eye patch had said something. Then Alia had laughed, making a dismissive-looking gesture with her hand while she leaned toward Alden. He had fixed his eyes on Hazel and replied. There had been some back and forth while Manon worked, and now. I am your granddaughter. Hazel shouted so loudly that the words carried over the music and up to Manon's window. I am your protégé. I've done everything you ever asked me to, and you gave my yes to that whiny, lazy little whiff the second he was selected. So that's what the idea eating away at you was, Manon thought while the girl below continued her rant in full voice. Some of the things she said were contradictory. Some of them made no sense. But Manon knew what Hazel was really saying. So childish. Such a common feeling and all was so useful to me, though this is definitely the most dramatic result I've ever had from pulling it out of someone. Manon wondered if she'd needed to do anything at all. To be snapping like this, the girl must have been on the very precipice of her self-control. She might have lost her head any second without Manon helping her get it out of her system. This isn't fair, Hazel was screaming at the top of her lungs, using far more words than necessary. My life is unfair. Manon smiled. Hazel was revealing grievances, wants, and weaknesses galore. She was a volatile creature, but volatility was only a problem if you planned on managing someone long-term. If you just wanted them to give you information or stir up trouble for someone else, it was a useful quality. The girl had spent her entire life at Olney. And here she was having such a terrible day. This, Manon thought, is an opportunity. You and I have a lot in common, the rabbit woman said, shaking her head sympathetically. She'd been going blah, blah, blah for a long time. Hazel had paid attention to enough of the chatter to know they didn't have anything in common at all. And her bare feet were freezing against the marble floor. This sofa was hard as a rock. Why did I agree to come with this annoying stranger? She wondered. Because she had run away from the party sobbing. Because she'd assumed the black sedan that had stopped for her had been sent by her parents to carry her back home in privacy, and the second she'd gotten in the woman had spoken as if she was affiliated with the family somehow. One of the help, Hazel had assumed. Someone from Grandpa Corin's office possibly. And when she had realized the rabbit was just one of those people who wanted to suck up to Avila. Well, Hazel didn't mind. Maybe if she disappeared and refused to answer her messages for a while, her family would understand how badly they'd treated her. Her parents and her grandfather could have stood up for her. Instead, they'd just flapped their lips pointlessly and cringed. My skill. They took my skill from me. She couldn't believe this was really happening. The ability was only useful on Earth if people didn't know she had it. And she wasn't required to get consent before using it like so many of her relatives needed to before they used their own skills. It was a privilege she'd earned for herself, a product of her giftedness and her effort. Her one solace for the rank disaster. That boy? I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't a big deal. But Grandma sided with him. It's like loot all over again. She thinks they're special even though they haven't done anything to earn it. At least loot was an S. At least he'd gotten it at 14. It was nothing he deserved, but it was something. Alden Thurin had just been a delivery boy for Hazel's chainer. She felt almost numb. The video filled her eyes, the opacity just low enough that she could still see the woman sitting beside her, eating the carrot she kept offering to share with Hazel. Hazel had taken a few pieces. Her mouth felt greasy, and the comments under the video pierced her eyes. You know it can feel really good to get things like this off your chest, the woman said. Manon something. Somewhere in all the bliss she had managed to convey that she was a contractor of some sort for Hazel's grandmother. Like that was a special connection they shared. Grandma probably doesn't know her name either. She probably smiled at her once, and this old lady thinks it meant she mattered. Hazel reached for another piece of the chicken and chewed it. She wiped her fingers on her dress. She could never wear it again now. It would make people think of Alden Thorne announcing that she was too dangerous to be around. Maybe she did want to get something off her chest after all. He's not stable. She gestured at the video in front of her eyes even though Manon couldn't see it. People shouldn't just believe whatever he says. A vow to spend months in bad situations usually come back damaged. It's sad, but it's the truth. I guess that's why he's so upset about his peace of mind. Because he's got problems. He's overreacting, and people are too ignorant about word chains to realize what I did wouldn't have been that bad to a normal person. Manon was quiet for a beat. Then, she brightened. Hey. Do you want to trade stories? I actually know Alden a little bit. I'll tell you some embarrassing things about him and you tell me about. Oh, whoever you like. Who's done something embarrassing around you lately? That sounds stupid. Why would I gossip with someone like you? I think I'll go, said Hazel, standing and heading toward the door. Not just yet. Manon sounded so disappointed. I've even got a few pictures of him in a funny costume. Let me just grab the tablet I keep my Triplanets photography on. Pictures? Hazel frowned. Maybe it would make me feel better. The rabbit woman rummaged around on a bookshelf for what seemed like too long. Why doesn't she just send me a copy through our interfaces? Tech could be better and more convenient for capturing photographs and video. Hazel loved her drone and her phone. Maybe Manon was the same. She stood beside the shelf watching Manon scroll very slowly through a photography folder on the tablet. "Alio thinks I use social media too much," Hazel said. "I told her it was my outlet, but she doesn't understand." "Hazel, why don't you get a productive hobby?" "But it's not like making fans isn't productive. And now they're going to think all the wrong things about me because of Alden." "Aliyah doesn't care about your interests," Manon asked in a surprised voice. "But you're her granddaughter. She keeps saying she expects me to be mature. She's not always mature. But I have to be. The older generations aren't always fair to the younger ones. I'd apologize on our behalf, but your grandmother is quite a bit older than me. When she was my age she'd already had her first child. I don't think she even knows who Grandpa Corin's father was. It sounds like you're more responsible than she was. I've been working on the true planets for years. I think I understand more about the real world than most people." The large, sideways tomato glass on the bookshelf caught Hazel's eye. It looked out of place with the rest of the decor in the apartment. She reached up to tap the metal case that held it idly, and she frowned as it slid along the wood. Wrong. She didn't feel like she had tapped it that hard. "Oh. I performed an extra force of the traveler's body just now. I remember. Over by the door, right before walking over here to stand beside Manon and see the pictures." She could even feel her own imbalance, but it never bothered her the way other people's did. "How strange that I let it slip my mind." Hazel enjoyed the whole set of word chains in the force of the body family. She liked turning the sweep of a hand into something explosive. She usually elected to cast a single one on an ordinary day though. "Why did I decide to add another one?" "Most people aren't thinkers," Manon said. "Or doers. They just exist. You're different. I can tell. Can Aliyah not see that about you?" Hazel frowned. "What did you say you did for my grandmother again?" "I run a little side business for her during a certain annual event. We've been partners for almost 15 years. Manon looked at the timer. "Unfortunately, my payment was supposed to be timed with Horatio, so that's it. Everyone wants to know when the healer would be back." Hazel rolled her eyes. "He's just being a whiner. Amy barely hit him with the car." He yelled about the gloss threatening his life and then requested assignment to Ortonil 3 for a supplemental healer school. He'll get over it soon enough and asked to come home. According to Grandma, he doesn't even like other planets. Manon's smile was strained. "That's good to know, but soon enough for someone as old as Horatio or your grandmother can be rather long to the rest of us. Anyway, where were we? You were telling me that Aliyah expects maturity from you even though she isn't always mature herself. Do you even have embarrassing pictures of Alden Thorne?" "How would she?" "That's right. That was the thought I had. That was why I cast the extra strengthening chain. Because the pictures sounded unlikely, and I thought she was a little creepy. The way she ate the chicken wasn't normal. Alden and Manon were both rabbits, but Alden hadn't been on Anzidora for long. Why would they know each other? Why would they know each other well enough for her to have pictures of him in a funny costume?" It sounded like a fiction the woman had invented just to make Hazel talk to her for longer. "I do," said Manon. "From a job we did together. They are on this tablet." Lie. Hazel didn't know Alden. But she knew about him. He had only had the one job. The one that had ended badly. It was so ironic that the job had been at Leaf Song. That school of all places. No wonder Grandma has completely taken leave of her senses when it comes to the delivery boy. She probably thinks the universe is shouting his name. Hazel started to turn away. She was going to march out the door and leave this pitiful lying rabbit to her pitiful little life. And then, the rest of the facts pulled themselves together. "The Leaf Song entrance examinations?" she asked slowly. "Is that the job you mean?" "Yes," said Manon, smiling at her as though she had said something flattering. In that moment, Hazel understood everything about the past few hours. "She thinks I don't know what she does at that school. She thinks it's such an important secret that Alaya wouldn't share it with me. You know I have more than one contract tattoo with my grandmother, Hazel spat. Her anger was boiling up inside her. Manon stared at her. More than one? You think she wouldn't trust me with information? Me? The nerve of this woman. She did that. To me. I can't believe she's paying someone like you with Horatio. Hazel couldn't repeat the precise details of Manon's work even to the woman herself, thanks to a rule in one of the contracts. But she would force out every biting truth she could manage around the limitations. You don't even do anything hard. All kinds of people could do that job. And we don't really need it. Grandma just thinks having you do it might one day give us something interesting. You're useless. You should be fired. Manon's eyebrows were heading toward her graying hairline. Now calm down. There's no need for us to have an arg. Are you trying to do it to me again? You think I don't know what you can do to people? You think Grandma Alaya wouldn't tell me something like that? I matter. I know things. I know who you are. Manon's face paled. You were there to pick me up right as I ran away from the party. Hazel shouted. Do you think I'm stupid? In the corner of her eye, where she had minimized the video, a commenter was saying her dress made her look like a convenience store burrito. I would never act like I did today. I would never say things like that. Hazel slapped her hand against the bookshelf so hard that a ceramic figurine fell off to shatter on the icy floor. You made me. I didn't. Manon said. I don't believe you. You swayed me. Why aren't you doing it now? Did your C-rank skill run out? I'm not a sway. Listen, Hazel, I understand you. She was reaching out toward Hazel with a hand. Hazel's own hand wrapped around something heavy on the shelf beside her. She swept her arm through the air. All of her favorite daily chains were with her, defending her from the evil maidwoman who stood before her. Hazel was graceful, accurate, strong. The Tameglass connected with Manon's temple. There was an impact. A warm spatter. The soft but weighty thud of a body collapsing to the floor. Hazel stared down, chest heaving. She felt cold and hot. The air smelled like blood. See contract, she said. Call my grandmother. I need her. I need her right now. In her hand, unseen, a single grain of sand slid from one side of the 15-year timer to the other, marking the passing of another minute. The party was ending. As the last few guests exited the alley and a team of low-ranked brutes and shapers began the cleanup, Alaya was situating a tiara on top of Midio's head. A call notice came in. Fine, Alaya said with a sigh. She winked at Midio's questioning look. Your cousin's calling. Do you want to place a bet with me on whether it will be an apology or not? Not, Midio said at once. 1,000 Argold. Done. This was their little game. She had a call go to audio only. Yes, Hazel dear. Do you have something to say to me? Grandma, Hazel sobbed. Grandma, I killed the rabbit. Oh. Alaya had accidentally yanked the tiara through Midio's hair. What did you say? She asked in a steady voice. I killed the rabbit. Alaya clasped her hands in front of her chest. The graffiti on the wall behind Midio switched to an image of a tongue in a lollipop. Repeat yourself, please, said Alaya. The lights of her interface flared and shifted, screens changing rapidly as she requested and paid for information. The boy had last been seen in public entering his dormitory with Lute and the other two. Hazel's last known location was an apartment building near Nautilus Needle. Alaya exhaled. Hazel, Alden Thurin may very well be an extraordinary friend to this family one day. I'm sorry you're having such difficulty adjusting to a slightly different reality than we had planned, but I see no reason to indulge your behavior any further. Not that rabbit. Hazel's voice was nearly a scream. Manon. The Leaf Song rabbit. She tried to use her powers on me. I had to. I had to kill her. It was self-defense. The grating sound of chairs and tables scraping against concrete filled the alley as the cleanup crew began to put them away. That's the third time you've made that face tonight, Midio noted, rubbing her scalp. Alaya glanced at her. Smooth, greater than Midio said in her tone. sweeping a hand straight down over her own face and making her expression blank. She was getting an interesting attitude now that she was a teenager. Aliyah couldn't appreciate it at the moment. I assume Hazel has failed to offer an appropriate apology? Greater than Mio asked. I win. Greater than. Indeed you do, Aliyah said. One moment, dear. Hazel, I'm so happy to hear about your decision. Practicing your skill and serving others is a good way to make up for that shameful display earlier tonight. Our friends will be pleased to have you around full time. What? Hazel asked. Grandma, there's blood everywhere. But it was self-defense. I swear. She was doing things to me with her powers. Don't just rush off, said Aliyah. Where are you? I'll send someone for you. You need to come home and pack. Is Hazel going somewhere? Mio asked. Aliyah nodded at her. Important news, she said to both of them. Hazel plans to become a volunteer on the Triplanets. She'll be leaving us soon. Volunteer? Mio asked. Yes. That's an option for us Janers. If you feel a call to service and choose to deny your own comforts and sacrifice your rights to payment and time off, they won't refuse you. Mio raised an eyebrow. So she's trying to avoid the backlash from that video. How long is she going to stay? A long time, said Aliyah in a thin voice. She's probably going to stay there a very long time. I suggested volunteering shortly after she affixed, but she was feeling such a lot of disappointment about her rank that she refused. She's had a change of heart. Would you like a car, Mio? Me? You're such a wonderful granddaughter. Aliyah leaned over and kissed her on both cheeks. I think you deserve more than 1,000 Argold. Let's get you a license. And a car. Or a helicopter. You pick. Alden took a deep breath and let himself slide beneath the surface of the water. He'd gotten a turn in the claw-footed bathtub. Finally. And all I had to do was ask Hazel for it to stay away from me. Easy peasy. He let the air escape from his nose and bubble to the surface. Recovery sauna time had done wonders for him after Monday's gym class, but he was still achier than usual. The hot water was good. He could feel his ori out, loosely looped around his fingers from the spell he'd been practicing while he soaked, drifting. It would be fun to have the word chain finished for the obstacle course tomorrow, he thought. But I think I'd have to stay up all night hacking away at it. Friday is a better goal. A notification light in indigo, his high-priority color, appeared and he accepted it with a thought as he pushed himself back up for a breath of air. Oh, it's just that. He'd been hoping it was Bo. Instead it was a notice that Manunbar had updated her social media page. He clicked through to look at it because he couldn't stop himself and saw, to his surprise, that the new post was her special away animation again. She got summoned? She only just got back. The hourglass turned over. Maybe they'll keep her for longer than a few hours this time. One or two of the boater members might still want to escape from her. If they're not all like Laura. No. He was supposed to be letting this one go. He'd done what he'd set out to do. If it hadn't helped, then it hadn't. Alden ducked his head under the water again. I wonder how long it will take to make an ice cube in hot water like this with my freezing spell? His ori-out stopped drifting around in the water so much. He felt a few of the loops tighten around his fingers. He smiled. Chapter 122. Alden had a suspicion that the day might be a bit different before he even left the dorm that morning. Jeremy didn't usually video call him from inside a bathroom stall at 7:30 am. Hey. It's good to see you instead of getting a text, but shouldn't you be in second period? Alden asked. He'd just pulled on a long-sleeved shirt, and he was tucking his laptop into his messenger bag. People have been talking about you all morning, Jeremy said. I didn't call earlier because you like sleep. I do like sleep. Thanks for respecting the time zone. Any chance they've been talking about how much they miss having me sitting in the classroom? Does that goth girl wish I was still there to loan her pens? She owes me 3. Don't think I forgot while I was away. I saw the video. Alden made a face. Did you go to a party last night and tell a girl that she was sketch and you didn't like her? Maybe. In front of her parents and her grandma, who's a member of the Anisidran government? Aliya's not on the High Council anymore. Also, there were a lot more people than it around. Also, that might not have been me. It could have been another guy who resembled me. Are you okay? Jeremy asked. Another avowed used their powers on you. Isn't that a crime or something? I'm fine. It wasn't a huge thing. I just really didn't want to have any more to do with Hazelville, and in the moment, letting it be known seemed like the best course of action. It sucks that I couldn't be there, said Jeremy. He grinned. I'll hate her for you from here. You rock, said Alden. Jeremy was wearing a shirt with an eyeball and a rock on it. More importantly, he said, did you sing a bunch of songs about an alien bird while wearing your gym jammies? That made it all the way to you, too. Silver lining. Then Jeremy's phrasing caught his attention. Did you just call my highly magical, very exclusive, wizard-made protective avowed gear gym jammies? That's what Kimberly called them. It's cute, right? It's definitely unforgettable, said Alden. I know you've got to get to class, but before you do, I had to check on you and tell you. Jeremy pointed at him. You've officially made it as a superhuman. Alden's brows lifted. How do you figure? Alden, there are memes. Line of asterisks. It could have been worse, but Alden was sure it couldn't have been weirder. As he went through the morning, he ran across several students and even one faculty member singing Finley's Go Correct songs, so that was good. Lots of people minded their own business or didn't care about his altercation with Hazel at all. A few, unfortunately, felt the need to corner him and give him their personal analysis of the situation. It was obnoxious no matter what their opinion was, since Alden didn't remember requesting critique from other teenagers who thought they knew him based on a short video clip and some facts they'd found on the internet. But beyond all of that, most of the CNH students who wanted to interact with him because of the video wanted to talk about. Did you get more radishes? Radish rabbit. Not my radishes. You'd better make the bullies buy you a lifetime supply, mate. Can't let them get away with costing a man his treats. I am grateful most people aren't taking it too seriously, greater than he told Lute while he knelt on a too thin cushion during their conversation class. But a university student I passed on my way here from the Wong building shouted, "Hey, Daikon." So it's getting worse. Now they're associating me with all varieties of radish instead of just the round, red ones I actually dropped. This is my future. This is my fate. Greater than I understand so small amount of what you say, greater than Luke replied, correcting a finger position for him. But I understand we still speak of the gone-away vegetables from last night. Greater than we do speak of that, greater than Alden said. Sorry. I'll talk slower. Greater than how do you say screenum? Greater than Luke asked. Alden frowned. I don't know. I'm not sure Tonans use those. Greater than I changed my screenum to the first radish. In its honor. Greater than Luke bowed his head and clasped his hands together in a prayerful posture. Alden didn't know whether to laugh or sigh. Of the memes Jeremy had mentioned this morning, only two seemed to be gaining traction. The first was a clip of Hazel shouting about how she mattered on Earth and the mother while her flapper headband's tassel whipped around. The second was Alden hastily raising a china plate in front of him and sending 11 radishes, according to the people who'd bothered to count, to their deaths. There were slow-mo shots of them falling. In one edit, someone had drawn little screaming faces on them. Rabbit drops his radishes was by far the most harmless thing that could pop up when someone searched for him, so he was torn between wondering if it was okay for something so silly to be making him instantly recognizable on campus and kind of hoping that it would become a lot of people's main impression of him before they dug into everything else. His roommates were right. The video didn't make him look that bad. Some assholes were saying asshole things, and unless he was being paranoid, the moment when Alaya called him one of the Buller's family friends seemed to be ever so slightly louder and clearer than the rest of the audio. But the family friend thing didn't seem 100% believable, he hoped, when he was in the process of complaining about a member of said family. and he looked calm and collected when he explained why he had a problem with Hazel. "Why did your grandmother sacrifice your cousin to the beasts?" Greater than Alden asked Lute as they put their shoes back on at the end of class. "Doesn't this situation reflect poorly on her, too?" Greater than. "Do you just speak our tone all the time now?" Alden shrugged. "I hadn't shifted gears yet. But it's good practice for you, so don't complain. I was asking why Aliyah. I've got translations back on, so I understood. There are probably 100 factors you and I can't guess, but I assume Hazel's been getting problematic in other ways. A few relatives mentioned that she has become more of a menace since she started having free time. She's used to being with a tutor, with Aliyah, or asleep. Aliyah's not training her for hours a day anymore. You want to have lunch together?" "Sure," said Alden. "But should you really skip your theater class as often as you do?" "No. Are you judging me?" "So hard." Line of asterisks. That evening, Alden's gym group stood in a huddle together, waiting for Principal Sleyca to arrive and officially mark the start of class. They were all staring at their fate. "Hoyu," Alden whispered, leaning toward him without taking his eyes off the monstrosity the faculty had created. "Can you complete that whole course?" Hoyu was staring at it, too. "I cannot." "Maybe it's not finished," Jerry suggested. "It looks unfinished." "That must be it," Astrid agreed. She had gelled her short hair into a mini mohawk to promote team spirit. She put her hands on her hips. "They've left off some ladders. And they must be bringing us scuba equipment." They were all standing at the black line that separated the course from the rest of the huge gym. Jeffy stepped right up to the edge of it eagerly. "I bet I can do it." "Really?" Lexi said in a dry voice. Ruther's short chain was twitching at the end of its handle. "How are you going to get over the 15-meter-tall barrier made of magic when there are no handholds?" "You think we have to climb that?" Jeffy asked. "Maybe we're just supposed to walk around it. Like in the maze." "Jeffy, my friend in Mohawkdom," Astrid said before Lexi could add anything, "let me explain how obstacle courses usually work. We're probably meant to help each other," Hoyu added. "That's common for this kind of thing." Alden stepped over to Maricel. She had a pensive expression on her face. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I was wondering if they would let me ride my soil platform over obstacles or not. I saw your video. You and everyone else." He'd arrived at the MPE building and gotten dressed early to avoid the locker room takes from certain people. For now, he was blissfully unaware of whatever some of the more tedious members of his class might have to say. Maricel watched him for a minute. "You could have pickled those radishes," she said sadly. "And they wouldn't have died." Startled, it took Alden a second to respond to the joke. He shook his head at her. "Shhhhhh. Don't reveal my true power." When Principal Sleyca showed up, she was wearing her own suit and carrying a small metal triangle on a stick that turned out to be a magical megaphone. "Good to see you again, everyone," she said. Behind her, instructors Marion, Foxbolt, and Ivanova were all holding tablets and checking over various obstacles. Despite Astrid's hopes, no ladders were making an appearance. "This is part of the course you'll all be running today. The other first years have run this route several times in their own classes, so if you'd like to compare your team times to theirs or watch their videos, we'll make that available to you." "Only part of the course?" Alden wondered. "Let's go over the rules." 5 minutes later, he was standing outside in his group's assigned lane of the Magiffies track. They were getting one half, and the group of 10 that would be running against them was getting the other. Alden listened to Hoyu and Reinhard argue over strategy and watched Lucille lace up a pair of dark purple boots that he found all shiny and fascinating thanks to sympathy for magic. In the gym, people who didn't want to risk wearing out or destroying ordinary athletic shoes just took them off. The suits protected your feet, so it was fine if you wanted. But out here, some of Alden's classmates were allowed to bring gear he didn't usually see. Lucille's boots were extra durable. Someone on the other team had complained about people getting special treatment because Wright made armor, but a raised eyebrow from Principal Sleyca had shut the whiner down. Alden didn't mind. None of the approved equipment was anything that should be a game changer, and there was no point in risking an injury just so that nobody would accuse you of having a tiny advantage. The team they'd be racing against to start with included Constantine, Finley, Jupiter, and Tayet along with 6 others. The other half of the class was back in the gym, having school emergency procedure practice sessions with Klein and Fragment while they waited their turn to run the course. Their race would be cut off at the 20-minute mark if they hadn't finished. The losers would swap with one of the teams in the gym, and the victors would stay out here for one more round. The losing team would have another race before the end of class. And then 2 more on Friday. So every team of 10 or 11 would have the chance to face each other once. As was typical of their gym periods, the explanation of what they should do had been brief and to the point, and they were expected to get to work and figure out the details as they went. Alden was going over the rules in his head again, too focused on not screwing up the basics to imagine what running the course would actually be like. They started out here on the morphable track, where they would run 3 laps with the same sorts of hurdles Alden had encountered on combat assessment day. At the end of the 3rd lap, they ran down a flag-marked path to the gym, where the more dangerous and impossible-looking half of the course was. Their interfaces would give them instructions as they approached obstacles if necessary. Both teams would begin their run at the same time, with all teammates participating. That was all simple enough. But then the aspect of the race that instructor Marion had called strategic interference came into play. Just so that he wouldn't forget a detail, Alden typed a list for himself while he explained it all to Jeffrey out loud again. 1. For a team to win the race, every member has to reach the end of the course. 2. A runner who reaches the finish line may not participate in the race except to offer advice to their teammates. 3. Every time someone crosses the finish line, their active teammates may take one hostile action to impede the other team's runners. One hostile action is defined as a single talent use, obstacle modification, or a physical attack by one team member. The hostile actor may enter the other team's half of the course. On the outdoor portion of the course, only harmless attacks and obstacle modification may be used to impede runners. Within the gymnasium, all attacks, including lethal ones, are allowed. 4. Injuries will be simulated by movement restriction. 5. Dead runners must return to the start of the race. 6. No killing your own teammates. Reinhardt and Hoyu were energetically disagreeing about a dozen different aspects of the race, and Alden could see why. The amount of strategy that would be needed to maximize a team's speed was huge. Excelling at this game would take planning, practice, and careful teammate selection. They would be getting the opportunity to do that in later academic terms, but for this, their first time, they were flying blind. Alden liked the notion of an obstacle course, and he had 120 feet of paracord weighted with a heavy-duty carabiner to contribute. It was fine with him if they all looked at this as an interesting opportunity to test their abilities, like usual. But he was getting the feeling that most of the others were more anxious and eager to prove themselves than they had been on Monday. I can shoot Diet. Reinhardt was saying. I know I can take her out. His preferred strategy was for Lucille and Maricel to plow through the course together and hit the finish line, so that they could get 2 attacks on the other team as quickly as possible. I've watched uni-obstacle course competitions, Hoyu insisted. It's different because a lot of those people can complete a whole course without assistance, but in this kind of team run, you don't send all of your strongest competitors to the end. You keep some of them in play so that they can help everyone else. He's right about not losing critical players, Jerry said. Though I'm not sure Lucille is actually our strongest competitor. She looked over at the quiet girl. You're literally our strongest, of course. But you couldn't run the whole route on your own if you got left behind, could you? Lucille shook her head. Could any of us, though? Alden wondered. Start in 30 seconds. Leslie Sley announced. Maricela was shaking her hands out and staring at the track ahead of them. Reinhardt made a strangled sound. Astrid bounced eagerly on the balls of her feet. Save your energy, Lexi said to her. Who, me? He grunted. They all stood at the starting line. On the other team's side, Jupiter was humming and glancing longingly toward the mound of freshly cut limbs and twigs she had stolen from someone who'd been pruning the grounds. Her team had barely managed to talk her out of telekinetically hauling the whole pile with her during the raise. Appropriate elemental weights were being provided for each shaper to use here and in the gym, but if they wanted something special, their teams were required to transport it through the entire route. A couple of the others were carrying heavy branches for Jupiter, so that she wouldn't be slowed down. Race start in 10. "I don't want to lose," said Everly, getting in a ready position. "Your ice will work great for messing with the other team," Jerry told her. "If we can get someone to the finish line." "I don't even know what we're doing," Reinhard muttered, checking the straps on his quiver one last time. "Just run as fast as you can and send back news once you hit the gym to report on the obstacles," said Lexi. "Don't be idiots. Nobody crossed the finish line without consulting the rest of us," Hoyu said. "The principal is watching," Jeffy whispered. "We know," 3 of the others replied at once. Reinhard scowled. "I'm more worried about the fact that they're making this footage available to the rest of the first years. 200 other people will be trying to decide if we should have gotten into the school with them or not." 3. "It'll be fine," said Hoyu. "Only if we do well. This is going to be their first impression of us." Alden preserved his cord. He was wearing it wrapped around him in loose, cross-body loops. Hoyu was his entruster, which was becoming a usual thing for gym class. "When?" Lucille whispered. "1, here we go." They took off. From the first few steps, Alden knew it wasn't going to be anything like his last time running the track. For one thing, this was a race, and for another, these weren't a bunch of B-ranks who'd failed to make the cut. Thank goodness running with my trait is one of the things I've practiced the most. It was a relief to finally have a ground element surface under his feet in class. He didn't bother to look at what was going on with the other team since no attacks would be coming in yet. Instead, he focused on his form, his speed, and eating ground as fast as possible. One day, they are going to give us something like mud to run across, and I'm really going to shine. This afternoon, he wasn't doing badly compared to his own teammates. Lucille and Jeffy were ahead of him, but having the magical help from Azure Rabbit had put him ahead of the ranks and Maricel. It's a nice change from being slower than most of them in the gym. The hurdles out here were walls of varying heights that rose from the track itself. He leaped the first easily, mentally thanking the trait for the height he got and Bobby for the fact that he could feel confident about proper form and knowing his limits when it came to making landings. He kept going. After climbing a steep hill near the end of the circuit, Alden jumped and pulled himself onto the top of a much higher wall than any of the others had been. He was relieved to find a mat waiting to catch people at the bottom. He hit it, ran a few more steps, and got the lap 1 complete notice through his interface. "I feel pretty good about this." He thought he was pacing himself correctly. His body was moving well. He completed the second and third laps in exactly the same way as the first, bypassing Jeffy, who'd taken on the task of standing beside the high hurdle and boosting people over it. Chat on their team voice call suggested everyone was doing all right on their own or with a helping hand for the last jump. Lucille had made it through the first indoor obstacle and was reporting on the next one as Alden left the track behind and ran down the marked path toward the gym. Reinhard wasn't very far behind him. "Who's ahead of us on the other team?" Finley and Tayet were way out front. He thought at least one of the other brutes was ahead of him. Alden flew through the open doors of the Magiffi's building and down the short hall into the gym. "Floor on." Instructor Foxbolt called loudly from her post at the start of the indoor course. "Green line." The obstacle course loomed in front of him. Green and red lines on the floor and the obstacles themselves indicated each team's path. Alden had a momentary flashback to the children's play area outside a fast food restaurant he had visited when he was little as he got down on his hands and knees and started crawling through a long plastic tunnel. When he emerged from the other end, he found the obstacle Lucille had mentioned in her update from just a short while ago. Go through. Yes, that was obvious. It didn't make the assignment look any more appealing. "So," he said aloud for the benefit of the rest of the team, The shipping container obstacle is on fire, as Lucille mentioned. It's a little bigger than a regular shipping container, I think, and the walls shoot jets of flame. The floor doesn't. Should I go through on my own, or do you guys want me to stick around and shield you? Hoyu answered first. Be there in a second, Lucille. How much damage did you take running through? Not bad, she said succinctly. Like a sunburn. 10% movement reduction. My suit got stiffer. 10% is bad, Reinhard said. Take a penalty like that a couple more times and we'll be moving like snails. I can probably ice the whole thing over. Everly sounded slightly winded. I don't think that's against the rules, but I'm not at the halfway point for my last lap. That's unlucky, thought Alden as the heat from the box in front of him made him take a step back. If Everly was standing where he was now, she could have handily solved the problem for everyone and then run on. I wish I'd picked the poncho now, don't I? The point was to force himself to come up with non-obvious solutions, but he still would have felt cool waltzing through the fire obstacle. The sound of rapid thumping from the tunnel behind him made him turn, and he saw Reinhard emerging. Carry me, the archer demanded, before he'd even stood up. Do your trick. You can, right? Yes. Should we just wait for Everly and get everyone else through without damage all at once? I'd like to go ahead, Reinhard said impatiently. It's important to get people to the end as fast as possible. Finley and Tayet are way ahead of Lucille. Alden looked down the course. Tayet and Finley were climbing a high magic wall by having her embed her darts in it and using them as handholds. Can you do that with your arrows? I won't know until I try to stab it with one and see what kind of settings they've got on it. Alright, but let's try to make sure I don't end up with a huge movement penalty either. It was less than half a minute before Alexei climbed out of the tube. Shield me instead. I just put on my Reinhard outfit, Alden replied, quickly shifting the archer's weight. Does this look easy to achieve? Reinhard was draped over his back with his feet hanging almost to the ground, human cloak style. His arms were stuck straight out past Alden's ears, gripping the quiver to offer some protection for Alden's face and torso. It was a very uncomfortable way to carry someone, but time seemed to be of the essence, so off we go. He hauled his human shield into the firebox, sticking closer to one wall and shuffling sideways as fast as he could along it with Reinhard positioned to take the brunt of the flames. He was through it quickly and feeling relieved as he dropped the other boy. I really didn't take any damage. Reinhard slapped Alden on the shoulder and thrust his paracord back toward him. Alden took it. Reinhard was his target now, so it was formally reentrusted. It's an all-or-nothing kind of shield. Reinhard started to sprint ahead only to stop and curse 2 steps later as he saw the next obstacle. Lucille already moved these for us. He protested, staring at the line of black weights in different shapes that stood before him. Each weighed either 500 kilograms or a full metric ton. The instructions flashing in front of their eyes indicated all the shapes needed to be moved down the course 20 meters and up a ramp to be dropped into the appropriate compartment before anyone else on the team could go forward. The obstacle must reset. Alden was bending his elbows and knees experimentally to see what the 3% movement restriction he'd earned from being slightly singed on his way through the tunnel felt like. He looked around to see Hoyu and Lexi both running through the fire, with Hoyu shielding Lexi from the brunt of the flames. Meanwhile, their group call was getting busy. I'm at the gym. Astrid shouted. I'm not far behind her, said Maricel. I can shield us both with the sandbags. Jeffy, get Everly and Jerry over that last hurdle. Hoyu hurried toward the tire shape and squatted to get his hands underneath the edge of it. He pushed it up and flipped it, and it hit the floor with a loud bang. We'll be nearly done with these by the time you get here. He squatted again. Lexi was concentrating on wrapping Rither around a cone shape, a little worrisome since this wasn't one of the challenges where they were allowed to chop things in half. Reinhard was shoving a sphere toward the ramp. Alden laid a loop of cord around the base of a waist-high dodecahedron. He bent down, preserved, lifted. He was gratified when it moved easily. Here we go, protecting our precious rope from this 1,100-pound villain that wants to crush it. The shape of the weight meant that when he lifted, it settled into the loop he'd made. He carried the weight out in front of him, being cautious on his way up the ramp because he was nervous about dropping it and having it roll back on him or someone else. After this, there's the rope climb straight up and then those bar swings. I can do those. The cord's going to be useful for the vertical ascent, too. He could lift people up, and then they could pull him up. Maricel could lift herself and others too. All together as a team it would be fast. From the top of the high wall there's the diving tank. That one looks harder to manage. He dropped the weight in the designated area and headed back for another. Maricel and Astrid had just run out of the fire. "Alden," said Maricel, letting a pair of charged sandbags hit the floor beside her, "let's move this one to Geth." A bell sounded. The red lines all over the other team's course flared bright, and Jupiter, who had just arrived at the weight-moving challenge with a pair of smoking branches in tow, cheered. A ripple in the air indicated the lowering of an invisible barrier between the two halves of the course. Reinhard was swearing. "Lucille," Hoyu called. "Can you see who crossed the finish line from up there on the bars?" "It was Finley," Lucille said. "So he's out of the race now," thought Alden. "Should I hit him?" Jupiter was shouting. "No." One of her teammates shouted back. "Stick with the plan. Everyone look out," Hoyu said. "Especially men," said Lexi. She said him. "We're screwed," Reinhard spat. Tayet standing on top of the wall. Alden looked. Tayet was up there, her chin-length black hair dripping, having obviously backtracked from the water obstacle. She fixed her eyes on him. He moved to position his paracord in front of his torso for some protection, but she moved faster. Her arm whipped through the air so quickly he only realized that was what the motion was when it was already over. A large dart made of a shining, nacreous material bounced off his forehead and hit the ground at his feet. It didn't hurt, so it took him a second to realize he'd just been killed. Dead. Back to start. When you die, take the path of least resistance out of the gym. Don't worry about the obstacles. Principal Sleyca announced through her megaphone. "Go!" shouted Reinhard. "Hurry!" Alden had already taken off. "Shit," he thought, focusing on his injury list as he ran. If this had been real life, Tayet's dart would have killed him so quickly his brain wouldn't have registered the pain. She loaded it with an explosive spell that blew outward in a fan shape from the point of impact. Just that fast. I didn't even feel her target me. Possibly he'd been too distracted. He didn't think so, though, since he'd known an attack was incoming. Alden had assumed a Meister with ranged weapons would have a targeting ability, but maybe she didn't. He hadn't worked with Tayet and Jim before. The S rank could just be highly accurate thanks to stats and talents, no additional targeting features necessary. It could even be that she targets points in space instead of people. I don't think I'd feel that. When Reinhard had shot him previously, the arrows had seemed to be semi-attracted to specific body parts. Like he told them to hit Alden Thorne's left knee even if Alden's left knee moved. Doesn't matter. Just get around the track 3 times as fast as possible. He passed the final members of his team on his way out the door. A death is really going to slow us down. If the reset timer on the weights is just a minute or two, someone will have to hang around or backtrack to help me move them. It felt bad to be the one who'd gotten hit, but there wasn't anything he could have done about it that he could see. He wasn't sure what the best course of action for stopping something that small and fast was. Dodge, shield, or try his newfound ability to grab it out of the air? When his feet hit the pavement of the track, a filming drone whizzed into position beside him, and as he approached the starting line, he got the race start notification with no countdown. His teammates were having an argument over combs about forcing people through to the end, who should run ahead, who should hang back, what talents they needed to get everyone through the rest of the obstacles. I'm just going to focus on running. He was alone out here, so there was nothing else for it. You guys tell me if someone from their team comes back toward me, he said as he cleared the first hurdle. He pushed himself. He didn't want to be the hold-up. As he lapped the track, he tried to plan the most efficient ways through everything ahead of him. Do the laps, through the tube, fire. If it was still iced over from Everly's spell, he was good. The only bright side about this situation was that dying had removed the movement restriction on him, and it wasn't much of a comfort, since his restriction had been so minor he'd barely noticed it. Halfway through the third lap, he said, "Be back in the gym soon." Maricel's lifting Jeffy over the wall. Hoyu reported. "He'll be through the water obstacle fast. Once he hits the finish line, the threat of one of us taking out Tayet might force her off the top of the wall. And toward the finish, too, if we're lucky. She's still up there." "Sniper perch," Reinhardt said. "That's more intimidating than I would have imagined it being at the start of this." Alden was on the grass, sprinting back toward the building, when Lucille said, "They are waiting for something." "What do you mean?" Lexi asked. A pause. "Lucille's in the water," said Maricel. "I think she means that other brute who's been standing there. Why haven't they gone through the finish line?" "Alden, stay off the gym floor," Hoyu shouted. Alden reached the gym seconds later and stopped right at the edge of the white floor. "Why?" He tried to take in everything. Tayet was still in position on top of her team's half of the 15-meter wall, a dart in hand. Jupiter was lifting Constantine up with a lithometer bag. It looked like a very rough ride. He was hugging the bag with his arms and legs. Maricel was providing a gentler elevator service for Hoyu with one of the sandbags. "I can't just stand here," said Alden. Hoyu's head was whipping around. "Jeffy, you need to get over our finish line now." "But what if you guys need help with the water? We have to take out a member of their team. Khan's best. Now. While Reinhardt's got a clean shot. I'm going to take out Tayet." "No, you can't." "You think I can't hit her?" The bell rang as Jeffy crossed the finish line. The green lines for Alden's team flashed bright, and the barrier went down. Before the green had finished flashing, the bell rang again and the red lines flashed. Hoyu said, "Take out Constant." An arrow cut through the air and struck Tayet in the ribs with force. She fell backward off the wall. "No," said Hoyu. "I told you I could get her." "That's not what I meant. Why would you shoot the fastest runner they have left?" "She'll be back right away." Seconds later, Tayet was whizzing past Alden on her way to take her second set of laps around the track. Water droplets flew off her as she passed him by. Alden made a hasty shield for himself out of his court while he waited anxiously for a sign to go. He chose the same zigzag design he'd used versus Big Snake on Monday, even though it wouldn't do much for the fire, and he had to assume Tayet could dart him through it. There were other combatants to consider, and this should help against some of them. He thought he could crawl through the tube with it on his back so he wouldn't lose it. He also thought he knew why Hoyu had asked him to stay off the gym floor. Dangerous attacks could only happen there. Anyone interfering with him before he stepped onto the white surface couldn't use much force, so he couldn't be sent back to the start again. "But if I just stand around until Tayet gets back, we'll lose anyway." "Lucille's coming back for you," Hoyu said. "Meet Lucille at the weights," Maricel said at the same time. The other team still hadn't used the attack chance they'd just earned. "I don't like this." He crawled through the long tube. When he was halfway through, Lexi said, "Stay in there." "Why?" "We're coming back for you. Cover your head." Greater than Maricel shouted. Alden dropped his preservation on the paracord shield and refroze it in a split second. Later, he would feel slightly clever for the quick thinking. The zigzags of cord draped down over his back, butt, and head. It wasn't like it was great armor, but it was the fastest armor he could possibly have managed with so little warning while stuck on his hands and knees inside a tube. Right then, however, it felt like a pitiful effort. He covered his head with his arms. He heard people shouting. A crack. And then a lot more cracking and popping as a damn forest shot into the pipe and through it. Jupiter's largest tree limb hit him so hard it ejected him from the tube, and he rolled backwards, his arms and legs unable to stop his momentum, to crash into the barrier that prevented students from getting thrown into the bleachers. Heart pounding, Alden tried to scramble onto his feet only to find he couldn't move. His suit wouldn't let him. Penalty, 100% restriction, unconscious, injuries. The list scrolled for a long time. With the low pain setting they were working with today, he felt fine, but apparently he was on his way to being dead. Again. He was hemorrhaging. By the way, you shouldn't talk or text your teammates when you're listed as unconscious. Leslie Sully announced through her megaphone. Alden's teammates were talking so much that he wouldn't have been able to get a word in edgewise anyway. Apparently, Lexi had tried to stop the flying limb with Ruther, but all he'd done was trim it a little, according to Reinhard. Now he wanted to trim Reinhard a little. Maricel, Lucille, and Everly were frantically trying to assess Alden's injuries from the readout they'd gotten and guess how long it would take him to die. Jerry was asking them all to confirm if she should cross the finish line or not. What a mess. The principal walked over to have a look at Alden. He was lying on his side, disturbed by the answers he'd received when he mentally requested more details about the injuries. "You can talk to me if you want," she said, squatting down to give him a smile. "How are you enjoying school?" "Less at the moment than usual," said Alden. "It's been good. I have cool roommates." "Glad to hear it." Her dark hair was in the same sleek bun she usually wore. After viewing a certain video, Instructor Colibri, from the university, wants me to strongly encourage you to come by her office and talk about your on-camera presence and your dress sense. "Really?" Alden said in a high voice. "How nice of her." "So nice." I'm very busy right now, but maybe next quarter. I want to strongly encourage you to keep up the good work. Instructor Waker was impressed with your efforts in class on Monday. I kind of wish he was here to throw tennis balls at me now." "Ha!" She shook her head. "He'd love nothing more probably. I'd also like to ask you to stop by my own office if you find yourself running into any trouble here at school." "Thanks," said Alden. "But it really has been pretty great so far." She stood. "I hope it stays that way. We've got a lot of talented kids, but things get tense for some groups when we actually start bringing combat into class. The team exercises should build some camaraderie at the same time. We'll see." The bell rang. Jerry had just crossed the finish line. Alden's suit finally decided he was a goner, and he pushed himself up and ran toward the door. He heard the bell ringing again and Hoyu said, "That was them crossing the finish line, Alden. So they have another attack chance." He had rounded the second curve of the track and was heading up the slope toward the final hurdle when Maricel said, "Where's Tayet?" "I think she's in the pipe," Jerry replied. "I don't see her from the finish line." Alden was running as hard as he could. It wasn't easy to find air for a conversation, but he was listening to theirs. "She's not in the pipe," Jeffrey said. "I've been watching for her. I just assumed she was back in the gym." He hadn't been able to see the course properly from the angle he landed at when he fell. So he had thought she had made it while he wasn't looking. She was fast enough that she should have been back in the gym by now. "I didn't pass her," he got out as he launched himself up and caught the edge of the wall. He dropped down onto the mat. "I didn't see her on my way out here." There was a beat of silence. "We need to pause for a second and think," said Hoyu. "Where is she? And why is she there?" "Ah," said Maricel frantically. "This is bad." "What is?" Lexi demanded. "The rules. Tayet might be able to use her." A human shape flew out from under the thick mat Alden was about to step off of, and an arm shot toward his foot. "Fuck!" he shouted, leaping back. "Sorry," Tayet cried. Her wet hair was plastered to the side of her face, and she had an impression on her cheek from the asphalt. "Did it hurt?" Alden clutched his chest. "What the hell? Giving people heart attacks had to be against the rules." "Don't back off the mat," said Tayet. "You might hit your head when you collapse." "What?" She pointed down at his shoe. A dart was sticking out of the top of it. He realized his foot stung. "You stabbed me? I've got a bandage." "It's a tiny needle. The magic on it just makes you go to." Alden's knees gave out. He flopped onto the mat. About 20 minutes later, he woke up lying on the bleachers with one bare foot. A small bright yellow bandage was placed just above his toes, and someone had used a pen to draw an animal on it that might, charitably, have been called a raccoon. It had little Z's coming out of its mouth. Groaning, he covered his face with his hands. Hoyu, he's awake. Hi, Alden. First of all, I am so sorry. Loot, I hear it was hilarious. Alden, what happened? He sat up and looked around the gym. His teammates were up on top of the bleachers across from him, listening to Fragment explain something about the MPE building's ceiling, if the direction her finger was pointing was any indication. Hoyu, we didn't plan well. It all collapsed. They killed Astrid and Lexi. We got Jupiter. Alden, I take it we did not win. Tayet was back in her sniper position, running the course with her team, so it was obvious. Hoyu, Reinhard and Lexi didn't hit each other with their weapons. That's a win. Alden put his shoe back on and went to learn some school emergency procedures. Our next try will definitely be better than that one. Line of asterisks. Dragging himself out of the gym after class, dripping wet and exhausted just like the rest of his team, he decided he hadn't been wrong. The second race was much closer, and he died only a single death to Heloisa, who'd tackled him so hard on top of the big wall that she took Everly Kim and herself over the edge with him. They'd lost, but he'd been more useful at shielding people and helping them maneuver over obstacles than he had the first run. And he'd made it across the finish line in the end. So at least he'd been able to experience the full course. They were focusing more on killing me than they should have been, though, weren't they? I guess because they saw the other team do it, and they figured it worked. Of course Alden wasn't happy with how it had all gone, but it was more upsetting that his teammates were disappointed. Everly was so frustrated after her second death that she'd been crying a little even as she kept going. Lucille just got quieter and quieter until people started snapping at her for failing to communicate. Reinhard blamed everyone else for everything. Lexi blamed Reinhard for everything. Jerry had asked Maricel if she couldn't go a little faster at one point, and Maricel, who was under a lot of pressure because of how useful she was on most of the obstacles, had almost bitten her head off. They were talking quietly to each other now as they slogged their way toward the girls' locker room ahead of Alden. By the end, even Hoyu's attempts at peacemaking were leaning toward intimidating instead of peace-inspiring. Too many different pressures building up. They'd all screwed up in gym before now, but this was different. More personal. Tayet was the politest of assassins, and Alden was still kind of miffed that she had picked him to kill. Twice. Not that he'd ever showed it. Maybe if I'd carried Everly on my back around the track, Jeffrey said. I think that's what I did wrong. I think everyone did stuff wrong, Alden said. Don't punch a hand dryer over it or anything. On Friday, we're going to do so much bet, because he's dead fucking weight. The heated voice from behind them made Jeffy, Alden, and several other people turn around. It was Winston. He was pointing at Max. Their team had lost twice today, too. I'm sure he was doing his best, Vandy said. We were all trying hard. Maybe if we meet tomorrow to plan. He didn't have magic for most of the second run. Winston shouted. Max shoved through the group. He looked furious. What? You don't have anything to say for yourself? Winston called after him. Did you do what Max suggested during the race? Alden asked. Winston rounded on him. I'm not talking to you. And I don't know why I'm talking to you, but here we are. Stop being such a dick. Max is amazing at strategy, and his spells are harmless traps and movement enhancements. He's got to be one of the most valuable members of your entire team for this activity. This isn't any of your business. Alden shrugged and turned away. Only the teams with B ranks lost. Winston said. It wasn't fair. Someone shushed him. A couple of people shifted uncomfortably. Very scientific reasoning, thought Alden. He followed Max, Hoyu, and Lexi through the locker room door. I didn't ask you to do that, Max said waspishly. I wanted to. He's annoying. And I got killed in multiple embarrassing ways. My self-control is shot. Hoyu shook his head. Again? Oh, Alden. The last time that happened you took the lives of 11, not you two. Innocent young radishes, Hoyu finished. Alden looked over at him. I am sorry I died so much. It really wasn't your fault. I think it was actually Khan's strategy. He's an asshole. Khan was standing in the corner of the locker room, unsealing the front of his unitard. Hoyu? Was it your idea? Lexi was staring at him. Why do you look shocked? Khan asked. I can't have ideas. Lexi raised an eyebrow at him. Khan gave Alden a nervous smile. It wasn't really a strategy. Just us trying to pull something together to fit a couple of goals. But I was the one who suggested we focus on you. I've been thinking I should do more brain work since I'm kind of useless at everything else in this class for now. It's fine. But why? Our goal was to incapacitate somebody as far away from help as we could. You seemed like a decent choice because you were going to be a really useful assist for the rest of your team. Having you out of the way was convenient for us. And you could clear the final hurdle on your own. If we had taken out Everly or Jerry, one of you would have headed back to the track with them right from the start and been on hand to help out. When you went down, they had to run all the way back out there for you and then run twice around the track carrying you. I think I'm glad I slept through that. It could have worked out a lot of different ways. Or not at all. We were lucky Reinhard shot Diet. Most of us were just planning to use the obstacle creation tablet to increase the final hurdle height, so you had to call for help. Diet put you out of commission for the whole game. Alden sighed. Thanks for the nap, I guess. You're not mad? He shook his head. Hey, said Khan, brightening. When are you guys going to invite me to see your apartment? I've invited you to see mine. It's just an apartment, said Lexi. Nothing to see. I have a slow cooker, said Hoyu. Khan blinked at him. I have a rug. Or two, said Alden. Lexi assigned us all our own food shelves. Okay. That's really homey, but why do I feel like you're all leaving something out? Tope continued.